Hello everyone, this is Menz here. I'm going to be reviewing the upcoming Tier 9 Russian heavy tank, the Object 257, that's coming out in a 9.22 update. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer, this tank, I believe it should be changed pretty massively, especially when it comes to its side armor. It's pretty broken with World of Tanks game mechanics because it does ricochet and block a ton of shots. Specifically, when you're firing right at this area down, it's pretty broken there, and hopefully Wargaming does actually change that before it hits the live server. But this video, it's going to be for reviewing this tank stacked up against other tier 9 heavies, and also looking at areas of the tank outside of just purely its armor. But I will get to the armor after I compare it here against other tier 9 heavies. I got a pretty good, a selection for the Tier 9 heavies here. I have the Object 257, the STI, T10, AMX M451, E75, and the Object 705 with both guns on it. I actually think the smaller gun on the 705 is better than the larger gun, so I added both. Looking at the 705 though, or the Object 257, excuse me, 705 is a different video, does 440 damage per shot, typical of a Russian Tier 9 heavy, 248 millimeters of pen with a very excellent 340 millimeter heat shell. So more or less looking at those two stats in line with other Tier 9 heavies, the E75 and the large gun on the 705 beat it out alpha-wise, and a little bit better than the AMX M451. Penetration is towards the lower end of Tier 9 heavies, but 10 millimeters of pen isn't gonna kill this tank. Going down, skipping rate of fire and reload, I'll get to that in DPM. Turret traverse is actually really good. It's towards the top end of Tier 9 heavies, best in this comparison, tied with like the T10 and other tanks. Mainly just comparing it to these tanks because these line up the closest to the Object 257 at Tier 9. Gun depression is only 5 degrees, which is pretty low. It's in line with other Russian heavy tanks, excluding the STI because that's kind of the exception for Russians. But the gun depression is a little bit of a problem to where this won't be able to fight over hills very much. It'll be able to fight over like very small bumps, but nothing that's considered a hill. Aiming time is surprisingly pretty good. Like the AMX beats it out, and I am using the smaller gun on the AMX, given that even though it has a little bit lower DPM than the other gun, overall, it does give it better accuracy, penetration, stuff like that. But anyway, aiming time, surprisingly decent. It's a little bit longer than the T10s, but it's better than the STIs. Dispersion is a little bit low at 0.38. So outside of the Object 705 on the other end of this comparison, it's got the worst dispersion out of this selection of tanks. The T10 and STI specifically, are better than it. When you get down to DPM, this is where the T10 does have more DPM. STI actually has slightly less DPM than this. The new Object 705 has more DPM with the smaller gun, a little bit less with the larger alpha gun. In the grand scheme of things though, I was a little bit surprised to see that the DPM on this, given the armor on the Object 257 in its current state, I actually feel like the DPM should be lower, and it should be, just maybe a flat 2000, something a little bit less than the STI, given that overall the armor is actually better on the Object 257 than the STIs. So moving along there, the gun is actually pretty fantastic, given the other stats of the tank that I'll be getting to. You lack gun depression, you lack a little bit of base penetration and accuracy. However, your gun hits decently hard. 440 isn't bad for a Tier 9 heavy, and your DPM, it's not the best in class, but just shrugging off, say, one shot given your armor from an opposing tank will give you that leg up in DPM rate, once you bounce one shot. Now, you know, the gun isn't perfect, but surprisingly, it is good given the other stats of this tank. Looking down at hit points, basically in line with other tier 9 heavies. You know, it's better than, say, the T10, the AMX M451. A little bit worse than the Object 705 and the E75, though. But 1900 is a pretty good amount of hit points. I'll get to whole armor after I pop out of this comparison. I'll glance over it. I do have full videos for the Object 257's armor in 2 separate videos. That'll be linked at the end of this video here. But more or less, it is in line, if you're looking straight on, it's in line with the other tier 9 heavies here. Basically, it has a lower plate weak spot that tanks can penetrate. It's got really tiny cupolas, so it's better than other tanks in that area. And it has a roof, even though it's really small, a roof overmatch spot to where 90mm or larger guns can actually overmatch it. So frontally, it's in line with other heavies, but bar none, it's even better than the Object 705 that has pretty good side armor, especially for side scraping. Bar none, it's got the best side armor, and the side armor is practically better than the frontal armor of most of these tanks that you see here compared to it. So that's where it actually blows all other tanks out of the water. Turret armor, though, you know, excellent as well. I would honestly say it did have the best. It has the best turret armor out of any tier 9 heavy. Even beats a lot of tier 10 heavies, because most people didn't know the Object 257's been in the game for quite some time now as a tier 10 tank. A lot of people thought it would be a reward, but it's a tier 9 now. Yay, tier 7s. Going down to mobility, this is the most surprising area of this tank, where a lot of you know, criticism of this tank is coming with the side armor, rightfully so, but the mobility on this thing, so the T10's being taken out. Object 257 replacing it, most people thought a little slower, more armor, plays a little bit more like the rest of the line. It's actually not the case. Looking here, specific power 15.45. This is 100% crew, no skills, no equipment, anything on there. Best out of all these tanks. Top speed, same as the T10, best out of all these tanks. Traverse speed for the hull, best out of all the tanks, and even blows the T10 out of the water. Where this is actually the most mobile tank of these tier 9 heavies. The only thing slightly holding it back is it does have slightly worse terrain resistance values, but they're not drastically worse to where it will actually murder the mobility of this. It'll definitely feel less mobile than, you know, if you're going from hard ground to, say, soft ground in this tank, but it'll still be very close to, say, a T10, to where it doesn't blow it completely out of the water, but it's at the very least tied with the T10 in the mobility department when you factor in terrain resistance. In a lot of areas, it'll actually, you know, speed up faster than it, and it will be able to turn, especially on hard and moderate ground, say like grass, roads, stuff like that. It'll be able to turn a lot better than the T10 and any other heavy that you see here. So that's something where I was really surprised, where already we have a pretty good gun, albeit a little bit inaccurate, doesn't have good gun depression. You know, we have really good armor, specifically on the side armor, but the front hull is actually pretty good as well. And the turret's, you know, really excellent too on the front and even the sides. And now we have pretty much, you know, the best mobility out of this selection of heavies that closely resemble this tank. So there's really no huge weakness of this tank yet. Going down to concealment, it's got the best concealment, albeit this doesn't matter too much because, you know, 6% isn't that high for any tank. Granted, you know, it does have the most concealment too. View range, it does lack a little bit of view range at 390. Surprisingly though, you know, the Object 705, the STI, even the AMX M451 have worse view range by 10 meters, 20 meters. So, you know, 390 isn't all that bad. Granted, it's not the best of its class, but, you know, again, it's kind of a wash. It's just average. So looking at all of its stats, honestly, I could see, you know, right now the Object 257 Granted, you know, the HP is a little bit low, and the DPMs, you know, it's a little bit low, but this tank could basically be slated at tier 10. And if they gave it, say, 200 more HP, nobody would really bat an eye at this tank outside of just a slightly low DPM as a tier 10 heavy. So basically it's a tier 10 heavy at tier 9, given it has same mobility as a T10. It's got comparable armor dead on to every other one of these tanks that you see. When it starts side scraping or flat on the side, its armor is the best out of all these tanks. Again, the gun, you know, it stands up very well against others. It's not the best in any area, but it's definitely not the worst in every area. So it's a very workable gun. So it has a lot of things going for it. Getting into the kind of the armor bit here, I'm going to glance over it because there are other videos I have out and other people of the armor. This is mainly reviewing the tank as a whole. So the front here, you know, you'll notice it has the lower plate weak spot, and it also has the hatches and the roof that can be overmatched right above the mantlet. Outside of that though, pike nose design, really strong. Things are going to bounce off of you. Turret, 350 millimeters thick across a lot of it, to where good luck actually penetrating the thing. It's like I have labeled over on the right here the mantlet weak spot. You know, it's a 283 millimeters plus effective armor. So that's basically, if I can straighten the tank out a little bit more too, it's basically right to the right of the gun if you're looking at it. So, you know, again, good luck actually penetrating that thing. So the armor frontally is really good. And then when you get over to the side, which is where the tank, again, I do think Wargaming should change the side armor of this thing. Basically, it is broken for the game mechanics. I outlined that in another video. They'll be linked at the end here. The weak spot guide, and also why the Object 257 should be rebalanced before it hits a live server. The side armor, you know, you have this upper side hull in yellow at 218 millimeters effective, so stronger than the lower glacis on the front, to where honestly Object 257 drivers, if you just drive sideways across the battlefield, you'll probably come out alive. That's how ridiculous the side armor is. The cupola does have small little weak spots. Turret side, you know, basically sits above 240 millimeters effective armor across a lot of it, so good luck penetrating it. And then the side here, once you get down to the teal areas and the top of the tracks here in red, it ricochets off because it's 65 millimeters angled at 68 degrees, with some spots with 30 millimeters of hull armor or 20 millimeters of track armor over it. So most of the time you're either shooting it basically slightly down or very far down, adding more angle to the side hull armor. So you're going to be ricocheting off of it no matter the caliber of shell you have, because, you know, basically 65 millimeters to overmatch it, it's greater than the FE 183's gun caliber. So basically that's where this tank is broken, to where if you're driving an Object 257, drive sideways at people and hope that they don't hit your upper hull, and basically you're better off driving sideways than frontally, which is why this tank is getting a lot of backlash, because basically the side armor is broken. I personally think that they should basically just lower the thickness of the side here, specifically behind the tracks, down to where most shells would be able to overmatch it, to where it would still have pretty darn good side armor across most of it, even in this little gap area. But once you start shooting where the track is, you'd be able to punch through it to overmatch it. So more in line with basically the blueprints and the design of this tank, because it's actually a real, you know, tank design. It's not just completely made up. And then once you get to the rear, I'm not even going to bring up the overlay here. It's pretty much penetrable by even tier 7s across the entire back, as long as you avoid hitting the angled bits. But pulling up I have a quick little show of this tank against a 198 millimeter pen gun on the Panther. More or less, it does stack up to where if you look at the purple areas on this tank, the purple areas will remain basically ricochet, bounce for any shell thrown at them, even if you're shooting it from, say, like a T110E5, Kronwagen, Conqueror, Super Conqueror, what have you. They're still going to ricochet off given the angles on this tank. But showing this tank against, it was the Panther's gun at tier 7 with 198 millimeters of pen, you'll see where the armor, it's strong, but basically a lot of people will be aiming, say, at the lower glacis. They're going to penetrate you on the front, but once you start angling and more people start shooting at your lower side hull, a lot of people are going to get really frustrated because you're not going to be able to deal any damage to this, especially if they start shooting your tracks, because the track only, up to here is the hull, and basically from the hand down, there's no hull armor behind that, and there's no hull armor basically in this section. So overall, the Object 257, honestly, reviewing this tank, is flat out the best tier 9 heavy tank in the game, and it's currently, I would say, it's not the best tier 10 heavy tank, given it has slightly lower HP. It's DPM, a little bit low in the grand scheme of things, which you'll notice the values here are a little bit better than my comparison, because I took off Brothers in Arms and the equipment I have on here. But it's almost, as a tier 9 heavy, it's almost as good as a tier 10 heavy tank in its current state, especially when you factor in a lot of people are going to be side scraping in this tank, to where if all you have to go on is hitting the side armor, it's going to troll people to no extent, and you don't really have that many weaknesses outside of 5 degrees of gun depression, slightly low accuracy and DPM. It's not the best, but again, they're not bad enough to ruin the tank, to where even if with this review video, even if Wargaming does lower the side armor, honestly, for the sake of balance in this game, not just at tier 9 but also going down to tier 7, because tier 7s are going to face this thing, they need to nerf the mobility as well, potentially even the hit points if the side armor remains pretty strong. It should honestly have low HP, given its class, going back to the comparison here. Honestly, the HP on this thing, 1800 HP, 1750 maybe, would be fine. The mobility, they should nerf it. Basically, the specific power, if they want to keep that for engine power's sake, nerf the top speed. It shouldn't be faster than the STI, in my opinion, given the armor on this thing. And even the gun, they should slightly nerf the DPM. But currently, the tank, there's no complaints if you're playing this tank. It's an awesome tank. It's fun playing it, but playing against it, because, very rarely will you ever see someone just drive a tier 9 heavy tank for the remainder of their World of Tanks career. I'm sure there's somebody out there that does it, but playing against this thing breaks the game. The tank itself here, it's just, it's awesome to play, but you kind of feel dirty playing it, more or less. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this review. Again, at the end here, if you want to basically hear more about why the Object 257 breaks the game in more detail, or if you want a full weak spot guide for the Object 257, take a look at the videos that'll pop up here in the next few seconds. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching this review. Hopefully, you're enjoying World of Tanks and the upcoming 9.22 update. And hopefully, if you're watching this too and Wargaming rebalanced this thing, they came to their senses and they toned this vehicle down a little bit. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. See you guys next time. Have a good one.